Michael Jordan finds his biggest childhood hater homeless. What he does next shocks everyone. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Michael Jordan was always a dreamer. Growing up in the small town of Wilmington, North Carolina, he was surrounded by humble beginnings. His family, working class and modest, didn't have the luxury of giving him everything, but they gave him the most important thing: belief in himself. It wasn't easy for a kid with big dreams in a place where not much ever seemed to change. But Michael had an undying will to rise above it all. In those early years, it wasn't just his family's support that fueled his dreams, it was also the people around him. There was one kid, in particular, who made it his life's mission to remind Michael of his limits. The boy, a fellow classmate, was relentless in his teasing. "You'll never make it in basketball," he'd say. "You're too small, too weak, and no one in this town ever gets out." Michael knew this was just one person's opinion, but it stung. It stung because, in a town like Wilmington, dreams often stayed dreams. Despite these words, Michael found solace in the game of basketball. The hours spent on the court, practicing his shots, his footwork, and his movements, were his refuge. The basketball hoop in his backyard became his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the doubt, even if only for a while. It wasn't that Michael was alone in facing these obstacles. Many people in Wilmington dealt with the same hardships. But for him, the stakes were higher. The mocking words of his schoolmate were a constant reminder of the world he had to prove wrong, the world that was quick to label him as just another kid with impossible dreams. But he didn't care. Michael wasn't playing for validation, he was playing for something deeper. He was playing for respect, for the chance to prove that he was more than the sum of other people's doubts. But even as he worked tirelessly on his skills, his rival in school remained ever present. This bully was bigger, stronger, and seemed to be the center of attention in every group. The playground became their battleground, and the insults became sharper with each passing day. Michael's determination never wavered, but the weight of the bullying sometimes threatened to chip away at his resolve. "I'm just not good enough," Michael whispered to himself one evening, after a particularly cruel encounter on the court. He had tried so hard to impress his classmates, to show that he had what it took, but it wasn't enough. The sneers and laughs still echoed in his ears. His family tried to console him, to tell him that he was special, that he was different, but even their love couldn't erase the sting of rejection from those around him. That was when something inside Michael shifted. He couldn't control the words of others, but he could control how much they affected him. Basketball, once his escape, now became his weapon. Every shot he took was a small act of rebellion against the doubts that plagued him. Every dribble, every pass, every perfect jump shot was a step closer to the man he wanted to be. The relationship with his classmate grew increasingly bitter. The boy, convinced that Michael would never amount to anything, became a symbol of every person who ever doubted him. Michael began to thrive off the tension. He would practice longer, work harder, and push himself in ways that no one could see. The late nights at the gym became an obsession. But it wasn't just about basketball anymore, it was about proving that his dreams were worth something. In those early years, Michael didn't understand the power of resilience the way he would later come to. But in hindsight, it was clear, his greatest asset wasn't his athleticism. It was his refusal to listen to the voices telling him he wasn't enough. His ambition was unshakable, and every setback fueled his rise. By the time he reached high school, the bullying had grown worse. His classmate, ever the instigator, continued to berate him, this time for his choice of sport. "You're wasting your time," he'd sneer, standing by the bleachers during Michael's games. "You'll never make it past high school ball." But something had changed in Michael by then. He wasn't just playing for validation anymore. He was playing for the game itself, for the joy of it, the pure love of basketball. Each time he stepped onto the court, he was no longer the shy, unsure kid from Wilmington. He was a competitor, a player who refused to back down. The taunts, the jeers, the doubts, they all became distant echoes as he found his rhythm in the game. His performance on the court began to speak louder than any of the insults. Michael's coach saw something in him that no one else had, an undeniable hunger, a relentless drive, a spark that could not be extinguished. He was pushed harder than ever, and every practice was a battle. But with each victory, his confidence grew, and so did his skill. The rivalry with his classmate, though never forgotten, began to fade into the background. Michael's focus was on bigger things now, bigger dreams, bigger challenges, and a bigger stage. The bullies never truly disappeared. As he moved through high school and into college, there were always whispers, always doubters in the wings. But Michael had learned one thing: their words didn't matter. He knew that greatness wasn't handed out, it was earned through blood, sweat, and unyielding passion. And as he stepped onto the court for his first collegiate game at the University of North Carolina, Michael Jordan was no longer just a kid from Wilmington. He was a force to be reckoned with. Even with his fame beginning to blossom, Michael never forgot where he came from. The boy who had once told him he would never make it lingered in his memory, not as a reminder of how far he had come, but as a testament to the power of defiance. Michael had always believed that one day, he would show the world what he was capable of. And now, as the world began to take notice, he was just getting started. Through all the struggles, the doubts, and the mockery, Michael Jordan found his true strength, not in the validation of others, but in his own unshakable belief that he could achieve whatever he set his mind to. And as he stepped onto the national stage, he knew that the best was yet to come. Michael Jordan was just a kid when the first whispers of doubt came into his life. Growing up in Wilmington, North Carolina, in a neighborhood that seemed far removed from the bright lights of the NBA, Jordan's dreams of becoming a basketball star seemed as distant as the stars themselves. His family wasn't rich by any means, they lived in a modest home where every dollar mattered. But his parents instilled something in him that no amount of money could buy: ambition. It was on the cracked, worn-down courts of Wilmington that Michael's love for basketball grew. There, he found solace in the game. The echo of basketballs bouncing on the court, the rhythm of dribbles, and the swish of the net became his escape from the doubt that surrounded him. But it wasn't long before that doubt took a more personal form. In school, one boy in particular made it his mission to remind Michael that his dreams of playing professional basketball would never amount to anything. This bully, who was bigger and stronger, often taunted Michael with cruel words. "You'll never make it," he'd sneer, laughing with his friends. "You're just a dreamer, nothing more." Michael's ambition seemed like a joke to him. The bullying stung. It was the kind of ridicule that cuts deep because it comes from someone who is supposed to be an equal, someone who should understand what it's like to have big dreams. But it was these words that would fuel Michael's desire to prove everyone wrong. He didn't let the teasing stop him. If anything, it made him work harder. Every time he was told he wouldn't succeed, Michael would find his way to the court and push himself even further. Hours of shooting, dribbling, and running drills, he would do it all, even when it seemed like no one was watching. Basketball wasn't just a game to Michael, it was a way to carve out a space for himself in a world that constantly tried to tell him he wasn't good enough. But the doubts never fully disappeared. The boy who had mocked Michael in school wasn't the only one to believe he wouldn't make it. His classmates, though friendly on the surface, seemed to view his passion for basketball with skepticism. It wasn't just that he was different, it was the idea that someone like Michael, a kid from a modest town with no connections to the NBA, could ever reach the highest level of the sport. Even Michael's peers didn't believe in him. That's what made the journey so hard, the constant feeling that everyone around you is waiting for you to fail. But Michael's resolve only grew. Instead of letting the doubt break him, he used it to push forward. There were nights when the only company he had was the sound of the ball bouncing on the pavement and the rhythmic swish of the net. Michael Jordan knew what it meant to struggle. He knew what it meant to be told you weren't enough. But he also knew something that no one else did: he wasn't going to let those words define him. In high school, Michael's talent began to shine through. But even then, the bully who had mocked him before didn't back down. The taunts continued, only now, they came with the added sting of seeing Michael rise through the ranks. The more successful Michael became, the more the ridicule seemed to intensify. His classmates would often whisper among themselves, making cruel comments about his every move. They would mock his dribbling, his shooting form, and his attempts to gain recognition. Just a flash in the pan, they would say. He'll never make it past high school ball. But those words only motivated him more. Michael didn't need the approval of his classmates or his peers. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone but himself. His drive was now focused solely on basketball, and no amount of teasing or mockery would stop him from pursuing his dream. The hours he spent practicing, the sweat and determination he poured into each game, everything started to pay off. By the time Michael entered his junior year, it was clear that he wasn't just another high school player. His talent was undeniable. But even with his newfound success, there was still that voice, the voice of the bully, echoing in the back of his mind, saying, "You'll never make it." But Michael refused to let that voice win. He had seen how easy it was for others to dismiss him, and he wasn't going to let that happen again. He pushed himself to be better than everyone thought he could be. Every time someone doubted him, he would prove them wrong. It wasn't about showing off, it was about showing himself what he was truly capable of. When Michael received the news that he was being scouted for a scholarship to play at the University of North Carolina, it was a dream come true. But even then, he couldn't escape the doubt. Even with this enormous opportunity in front of him, there were still those who questioned his abilities. They couldn't see what he had inside, a deep, unshakable belief in himself that would push him to greatness. At UNC, Michael's journey continued to unfold. He was still young, still learning, but it was clear that he was something special. He worked harder than anyone, practiced longer, and never let his doubts define him. And with each passing game, he showed the world that the kid from Wilmington, the one everyone thought would fail, was destined for something greater. The boy who had once mocked him in school. He was nowhere to be found. But Michael's determination to rise above his doubters had become his driving force. He wasn't just playing to prove someone wrong. He was playing to fulfill his own dream, to prove to himself that anything was possible if he kept pushing, no matter the odds. The real turning point, though, came when Michael realized that his greatest opponent was never the people who doubted him. It was his own self-doubt. He had spent so many years fighting against the words of others that he had forgotten to focus on his own belief in himself. And when he did, when he stopped looking for validation from anyone but himself, that's when Michael Jordan became the player we all know today. But back in Wilmington, the streets still carried the echoes of the boy who once said Michael would never make it. Little did Michael know, this same voice would reappear in his life years later, but not in the way he imagined. The stage was set for a dramatic encounter that would not only test Michael's character but would also redefine what it meant to truly overcome the past. For now, though, his path was clear. Michael Jordan was just getting started, and nothing, not even the doubters, would stand in his way. As Michael Jordan transitioned from college to the professional stage, the world of basketball changed forever. The kid from Wilmington, once told he'd never make it, had become the face of the NBA, a symbol of ambition, drive, and talent. But even with the success, the road was far from smooth. The challenges that awaited him in the NBA were different from anything he had encountered before, and they would push him further than ever before. Michael's entry into the NBA wasn't a smooth transition. Despite his college success at the University of North Carolina, there were questions about whether he could truly translate his game to the highest level. The skeptics were everywhere. Some critics pointed to his style of play, others questioned his mentality, and many still didn't believe he could carry a team to the championship. But Michael's mind was set on one thing, proving everyone wrong. The Chicago Bulls, who had drafted him with the 3rd overall pick in the 1984 draft, were far from the powerhouse they would become. At the time, they were a team struggling to find an identity. Michael's arrival was seen as a glimmer of hope, but it wasn't the instant success that many fans and critics expected. There were still growing pains. The team's chemistry wasn't where it needed to be, and despite Michael's individual brilliance, the Bulls were far from contenders. However, Michael wasn't one to back down from challenges. He dedicated himself to perfecting his craft, focusing on his weaknesses and constantly improving. His intense competitive nature drove him to practice longer, play harder, and study the game with an unmatched level of detail. Whether it was working on his jump shot, refining his defensive game, or studying his opponents, Michael knew that success in the NBA required more than just talent. It required a relentless work ethic. The turning point for Michael came during his third season in the league. The Bulls, now beginning to take shape as a team, began to improve. Michael's leadership on the court was undeniable. He wasn't just scoring points, he was lifting his teammates, demanding more from them and showing them what it meant to compete at the highest level. But even as his game grew, so did the intensity of the opposition. The league was full of talented teams, and every team had its own star, many of whom were also determined to prove they were the best. For Michael, the ultimate challenge came from his direct competition. The Boston Celtics, led by Larry Bird, were the dominant team in the NBA. The Celtics had established a dynasty, and the rivalry between Bird and Jordan became one of the most talked about matchups in basketball history. In their early meetings, the Celtics were too much for the Bulls. Michael, despite his brilliance, couldn't carry his team past Bird's squad in the playoffs. Yet, the challenge only fueled Michael's fire. Losing wasn't in his nature. He wanted more. He wanted to be the best, and to do that, he needed to beat the best. The battles with Bird and the Celtics were just the beginning of a series of rivalries that would define Michael's career. As the years went on, new challenges emerged. The Detroit Pistons, led by Isaiah Thomas, became the next hurdle. Known for their physical, brutal style of play, the Pistons embodied everything that Michael disliked. They were a team built on toughness and intimidation, and they made it their mission to break Michael down. The Pistons' bad boys mentality was the antithesis of everything Michael stood for. They played a hard-nosed brand of basketball, one that often crossed the line between physicality and brutality. For Michael, the Pistons were more than just opponents, they were the embodiment of every obstacle he had ever faced. Their goal wasn't just to beat the Bulls, it was to break Michael's spirit. The Pistons would often double-team him, push him around, and do everything in their power to take him out of his game. But Michael, never one to back down from a challenge, met their aggression with resilience. It became clear that the only way for the Bulls to get over the hump was for Michael to rise above it all and prove that no amount of physicality could stop him. The battles with the Pistons reached their peak during the 1991 Eastern Conference Finals. After several years of playoff heartbreak, the Bulls were finally in a position to beat the Pistons and move on to the NBA Finals. The series was a test of wills, Michael's will against the Pistons' toughness. In the end, Michael and the Bulls emerged victorious, a moment that defined the era. With that series win, Michael Jordan had taken his first step toward greatness, but the road was far from over. He knew that to be remembered as the best, he had to keep going, keep winning, and continue proving that he could overcome whatever obstacles the game threw at him. The 1991 NBA Finals marked the start of the dynasty that would dominate the league for the next several years. The Bulls, with Michael at the helm, defeated the Los Angeles Lakers in 5 games to win their first championship. Michael's performance in the series was nothing short of spectacular, and his dominance on both ends of the floor was unmatched. It was clear that the days of Michael being doubted were over. He had proven himself not just as a scorer, but as a complete player, capable of carrying a team to the ultimate prize. But even with the championship under his belt, Michael wasn't content. He didn't want just one title, he wanted more. The next few years saw Michael and the Bulls create a dynasty. They went on to win 2 more championships in 1992 and 1993, and in each series, Michael's dominance only grew. He was no longer just a player, he was a legend in the making. The competition in the NBA only got tougher, but Michael's drive to win remained the same. Whether it was the Lakers, the Knicks, or the Suns, Michael was always the focal point of the Bulls' success. His ability to elevate his game in the biggest moments became his trademark, and his clutch performances in the finals became a hallmark of his career. But even as Michael's star continued to rise, there were always those who doubted him, those who questioned whether he was truly the best. The media, the fans, and even some of his peers would continue to put him to the test. But in Michael's eyes, that was just another challenge to overcome. The more they doubted him, the harder he worked, the better he became. In those early years of his career, Michael Jordan had faced the world's skepticism. He had battled physical teams, mental challenges, and his own self-doubt. But through it all, he had emerged as the NBA's brightest star. His grit, determination, and relentless pursuit of greatness were the driving forces behind his success. But this was just the beginning. The real test of Michael Jordan's legacy was yet to come. As he would soon discover, even the greatest players must face their greatest challenge yet, the challenge of maintaining greatness. And for Michael, that would be a battle that would test his character more than anything else. The 1989 playoffs were a pivotal moment in Michael Jordan's career. Up until then, he had dazzled fans with his skill, but the ultimate question remained, could he deliver when it counted most? The Chicago Bulls, still a team in transition, were facing off against the Cleveland Cavaliers in the first round. It was a matchup that seemed like just another step on the road to greatness, but it would become a defining moment in Jordan's legacy. In Game 5, with the series tied at 2 games apiece, the Bulls found themselves trailing in the final moments of the game. The ball was in Michael's hands. He had faced pressure before, he had been the centerpiece of the Bulls' offense for years, but this was different. This was the moment that would separate him from the rest. With time winding down, Michael took a shot that would become one of the most iconic in NBA history. The shot, later dubbed the shot, was a clean jumper over the outstretched arms of Craig Ello, a defensive specialist for the Cavaliers. The crowd at the Richfield Coliseum fell silent as the ball sailed through the air, and the moment seemed to stretch in time. The ball swished through the net as the buzzer sounded, and the Bulls won the game by a single point, sending them to the next round. It wasn't just a game winner, it was a statement. That shot changed everything for Michael Jordan. Up until that moment, he had been a great player, but there were still questions about whether he could carry his team to the ultimate prize. With one flawless shot, he had proven that he could perform under the highest of pressures. That moment encapsulated the essence of who Michael was as a player, unstoppable, calm under pressure, and always ready to deliver when it mattered most. The game-winning shot against the Cavaliers became a symbol of Jordan's will to win. It wasn't just about the physical execution of the shot, though that was impressive enough, it was about his mental toughness. In those final moments, when every eye in the arena was focused on him, Michael didn't crumble. He didn't let the weight of the moment overwhelm him. Instead, he embraced it, used it to fuel his confidence, and delivered a performance that would forever be etched in basketball lore. That shot also marked a shift in the perception of Michael Jordan as a player. No longer was he just a scorer, he was a clutch performer capable of winning games in the most pressure-filled situations. The Cavaliers had been one of the toughest teams in the league, and for Michael to knock them out with such a memorable play only added to his mystique. It wasn't just a victory for the Bulls, it was a victory for Michael Jordan's reputation as the best player in the league. After the shot, the media and fans began to recognize Michael as more than just a player with extraordinary talent. He was becoming a living legend, someone who could change the course of a game with one moment of brilliance. Yet, for all the accolades and attention that came with it, Michael remained focused on the bigger picture. He wasn't satisfied with individual moments, no matter how iconic. He wanted championships, the ultimate prize that would solidify his legacy in the NBA. The Bulls went on to lose that series in the Eastern Conference Finals to the Detroit Pistons, but the message had been sent. Michael Jordan was no longer just a great player, he was a winner, someone who could perform in the biggest moments of the game. But that moment, the game-winning shot against the Cavaliers, remained a turning point. It was the beginning of a shift in the narrative surrounding Jordan. While the Cavaliers were left stunned, Michael Jordan's victory became a symbol of what could be achieved when talent met opportunity. The shot against Cleveland proved that he had the ability to overcome the pressure of big moments and deliver for his team. It wasn't just a lucky shot, it was a culmination of years of hard work, sacrifice, and mental toughness. The Chicago Bulls may have fallen short of a championship that year, but Michael had set the stage for the future. It was clear that this wasn't just the beginning of a career, it was the beginning of a dynasty. Michael had now proven to the world what he was capable of, and the rest of the league knew it. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be many more challenges, including rivalries with some of the best teams in the NBA. But with that shot, Michael Jordan had set the standard for what it meant to be a clutch performer, and it was clear that the Bulls' pursuit of an NBA championship was far from over. As Michael's career continued to unfold, that moment against the Cavaliers would always serve as a reminder of his greatness. It was the moment that helped elevate him to the status of an NBA legend. It wasn't just about one shot, it was about the mentality that he carried with him every time he stepped onto the court. Michael Jordan wasn't just playing for victory, he was playing to leave a legacy that would stand the test of time. That legacy would soon take shape as the Chicago Bulls built a team around Michael that would dominate the NBA for years to come. But even with all the success that was on the horizon, that shot against Cleveland would always be remembered as one of the key turning points in Michael Jordan's career. It was the moment he made the world take notice. Behind Michael Jordan's rise to NBA superstardom, there was a side that few fans saw. His life wasn't just about basketball courts, championships, and dunking over defenders. It was about the personal struggles, the pressure to maintain greatness, and the sacrifices he made for the game he loved. As Michael's career flourished, so did the expectations placed on him. Every game was an opportunity to be the greatest. Every season carried the weight of an entire city and millions of fans who expected nothing less than perfection. But for Michael, this expectation came with a cost. From the outside, Michael's rise to the top looked effortless. His dazzling plays, clutch performances, and relentless pursuit of excellence made him a beloved figure. But for those closest to him, the reality of Michael Jordan's life was filled with tension, uncertainty, and a constant need to perform at the highest level. The demands of fame, coupled with the pressure to win, began to take a toll on his personal life, even as his basketball career soared. In his early years with the Bulls, Michael was consumed by the game. Basketball wasn't just a job, it was his identity. Every practice, every game, every media appearance was part of the contract he signed with success. And while the world saw a player who could seemingly do no wrong, Michael was battling with an internal struggle. He was trying to reconcile his love for the game with the ever-growing expectations from fans, coaches, and the media. The pressure was relentless. As the Bulls became a dynasty, Michael's success meant even more eyes were on him. Every missed shot, every turnover, was scrutinized. In a sport where every move was dissected, Michael found it hard to live a normal life. The pressure to be perfect weighed heavily on him, and in the quieter moments, away from the court, he would often reflect on whether this was truly the life he had envisioned for himself. This pressure reached a breaking point during the 1993 season. Michael had led the Chicago Bulls to 3 consecutive NBA championships, but the toll it took on him was becoming apparent. His father, James Jordan Sr., who had always been a stabilizing force in Michael's life, was his biggest supporter and confidant. James had been there through the tough moments, watching Michael struggle with the weight of expectations and reminding him of the importance of family and balance. But in the summer of 1993, tragedy struck. James Jordan Sr. was tragically murdered in a robbery while driving home. The news devastated Michael. Losing his father was not just a personal tragedy, it was a loss of his closest ally, the one person who had always kept him grounded. For Michael, basketball had always been a way to cope with his emotions, a way to channel his pain and anger into something positive. But after his father's death, the game didn't seem the same. Michael's grief took over, and he made a decision that shocked the sports world. He retired from basketball. At the peak of his career, after winning 3 championships and achieving everything most players only dream of, Michael Jordan walked away from the game. His retirement was a break from the relentless pursuit of perfection. It was a break from the pressure, the constant media attention, and the emotional toll that being the greatest player in the world had taken on him. His decision to retire was a reflection of the inner turmoil he had been experiencing. While many saw his departure as a result of his father's death, Michael later admitted that he had reached a point where he didn't feel the same passion for the game anymore. It was no longer fun. The grind of winning championships, of living up to the impossible standards set for him, had taken away the joy he once found in basketball. For some, Michael's retirement was a relief. It gave them a chance to see a different side of him, a side that wasn't consumed by basketball. But for Michael, stepping away from the game was a painful decision. It wasn't easy to leave behind everything he had worked so hard to achieve. He had given so much of himself to the game, and now it was time for him to rediscover who he was outside of basketball. After his retirement, Michael Jordan pursued a new passion, baseball. It was a move that confused many of his fans and even some of his closest friends. He had always loved baseball as a child, and playing the sport had been one of his dreams before basketball took over his life. But his decision to step away from basketball and play for the Birmingham Barons, a minor league affiliate of the Chicago White Sox, was a testament to his need to step out of the shadow of basketball and explore a different side of himself. Baseball didn't provide the same rush for Michael. It was a humbling experience. He wasn't the star of the show. He wasn't the one everyone was watching. He wasn't even in the major leagues. For the first time in his life, Michael was a newcomer, working his way up the ranks and proving himself in a sport where he wasn't the best. It was a strange experience, and while Michael found some fulfillment in it, it didn't take long for him to realize that basketball was his true passion. In 1995, Michael Jordan returned to the NBA, and with him, the Chicago Bulls regained their dominance. His comeback wasn't immediate. It took time for him to find his rhythm again. But over time, he reestablished himself as the player who could take over games with ease. The mental and emotional break he had taken seemed to refresh him, and soon, the Chicago Bulls were back on top of the NBA, winning 3 more championships in the late 90s. Though Michael's return was a triumph, it was also a reminder of the struggles that had shaped him. His hiatus from the game had allowed him to step back and assess his priorities, but it also reinforced the fact that greatness comes with a price. Michael's return was a victory, but it was also a stark reminder of the intense emotional and mental strain that came with being the greatest. Looking back on it all, Michael Jordan's story wasn't just about on-court success, it was about overcoming the invisible battles that come with fame, expectation, and the drive to be the best. His struggles behind the scenes made him human. They reminded fans that even the greatest athletes face personal demons. Michael Jordan's legacy wasn't built only on his championships or his flawless performances on the court, it was also built on his resilience in the face of adversity, his ability to confront his struggles, and his decision to come back stronger each time he was knocked down. As Michael's career continued to unfold, he learned that basketball was more than just a game. It was a way for him to express himself, to cope with the pressures of life, and to prove to himself that he could overcome anything that came his way. The journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't always glamorous. But in the end, it was his ability to push through the toughest times that truly defined his greatness. By 1993, Michael Jordan had achieved more than most could ever dream of. He had won 3 consecutive NBA championships, earned countless accolades, and built a legacy that seemed unbreakable. But despite all his success, something was missing. The relentless pursuit of perfection had begun to weigh heavily on him. The pressure to maintain greatness, to win every game, to constantly be the best, while fulfilling the expectations of millions, was no longer just a challenge, it was starting to feel like a burden. The sudden and tragic death of his father, James Jordan Sr., shook Michael to his core. James had always been Michael's biggest supporter, his rock, and his guiding force. Losing him wasn't just the death of a parent, it felt like the loss of the very foundation that had supported his dreams. Michael's world, once centered around basketball, now seemed empty. For the first time in his life, Michael was questioning everything: his love for the game, his identity as a basketball player, and his place in the world. In the aftermath of his father's death, Michael made a decision that stunned the basketball world. He retired from the NBA. At the peak of his career, just after winning 3 championships in a row, Michael Jordan walked away from the game. To most, it seemed incomprehensible. How could the greatest player of his generation, possibly the greatest player of all time, simply quit? But for Michael, the decision was clear. Basketball no longer brought him the same joy it once did. The grind of competing at the highest level, the constant media scrutiny, and the overwhelming pressure to win, it all became too much. Michael needed a break. The decision to retire wasn't easy. For years, basketball had been Michael's life. It was more than just a sport to him, it was his identity. But in the wake of his father's death, he realized that he had lost touch with the very thing that had made him fall in love with the game in the first place. The fun, the freedom, the pure love of basketball, those feelings had been overshadowed by the weight of expectations. Retirement was a way for Michael to step away, to clear his mind, and to find himself again. It was his way of escaping the suffocating pressure that had been building over the years. But stepping away from basketball also meant stepping away from everything that had defined him. He was no longer Michael Jordan, the basketball legend. He was simply Michael Jordan, trying to make sense of his life without the game that had always been his refuge. After his retirement, Michael turned to baseball, a sport he had loved growing up. His father had always dreamed of him playing professional baseball, and for Michael, it seemed like a natural outlet for his grief and need for reinvention. Michael signed a minor league contract with the Chicago White Sox and played for their Double-A affiliate, the Birmingham Barons. For the first time in years, he was no longer under the microscope of the NBA. He was no longer the greatest basketball player in the world, he was just another player trying to make it in baseball. His time in baseball was humbling. The skills required for baseball were different from those in basketball, and Michael quickly found that the transition wasn't easy. He struggled at the plate and never reached the level of success that he had in basketball. Yet, there was something freeing about being in a different environment, where his name wasn't synonymous with greatness. It allowed Michael to experience life without the pressures of living up to the impossible expectations placed on him in basketball. However, despite the allure of baseball, Michael knew deep down that basketball was his true calling. He had stepped away from the game to find peace, but it was clear that his heart still lay on the basketball court. The itch to return, to prove that he still had it, began to resurface. After a little more than a year away from the NBA, Michael Jordan made the decision to return to the Chicago Bulls. His return was not without its challenges. Michael hadn't played professional basketball in over a year, and his skills were rusty. The game had changed while he was gone, other players had stepped up, new stars had emerged, and the pressure on Michael to be the same dominant force he had been was immense. But Michael wasn't concerned about what the world expected of him. He was concerned about proving something to himself, that he could still be the player he once was. The transition back to the NBA wasn't immediate. Michael's return was marked by ups and downs. He wasn't the same unstoppable force right away. But it didn't take long for the old Michael to resurface. By the end of the 1995 season, he was playing at a level few could match, and by the start of the 1995 to 1996 season, he had fully reestablished himself as the best player in the league. The Chicago Bulls, now fully equipped with Michael's leadership, went on to win another 3 consecutive championships, cementing Michael's place in history as one of the most dominant athletes to ever play the game. Michael's return to the NBA was not just a testament to his basketball skills, it was a testament to his resilience. Despite stepping away from the game at the height of his career, Michael had come back stronger than ever. His ability to navigate personal loss, reinvent himself, and rediscover his passion for the game showed that the true measure of greatness wasn't just in championships or records. It was in the strength to overcome life's challenges, to rise above the struggles, and to find your purpose once again. But Michael's retirement and subsequent return also marked a turning point in his career. It wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about finding balance in his life. It was about understanding that there was more to his identity than just being Michael Jordan, the basketball player. Over the years, he had learned to embrace other parts of himself, his role as a father, a businessman, a mentor, and a philanthropist. Basketball was no longer the sole source of his identity, but it remained the driving force behind his passion and his determination to succeed. As the 1990s came to a close, Michael Jordan had firmly reestablished himself as not just an NBA champion, but as a global icon. The 6 championships he won with the Bulls, the MVP awards, the countless accolades, all of it was part of a legacy that would live on long after he left the game. But even as he looked back on his career with pride, Michael understood that his true legacy was not just about the titles or the fame. It was about the way he played the game, the passion, the work ethic, and the drive to always be better. The 1990s were Michael's decade, but they were also a decade of self-discovery. His retirement, his brief time in baseball, and his eventual return to basketball allowed him to grow in ways that went beyond the sport. The legend of Michael Jordan was no longer just a tale of athletic achievement. It was a story of resilience, reinvention, and the pursuit of purpose beyond the game. Michael Jordan's return to basketball in 1995 marked more than just a comeback for him. It was the dawn of a new era for the Chicago Bulls. His first year back after his brief retirement was shaky. He had to shake off rust and adjust to a game that had evolved during his absence. The team itself had gone through its own changes, with new faces and a different dynamic. But Michael's return was still a significant moment. The foundation was in place, and with Jordan back, it was clear that the Bulls were once again positioned to dominate the NBA. The 1995 to 1996 season was the start of a new chapter in the Bulls' legacy. Under head coach Phil Jackson, who had helped guide the team to championships before Michael's first retirement, the Bulls were now complete. Alongside Michael, the team had a deep supporting cast that included players like Scottie Pippen, Ron Harper, Steve Kerr, and Tony Kukoc. But it was Jordan who became the centerpiece once again, his leadership and skill driving the team's success. The 1995 to 1996 season was one for the history books. The Bulls finished the regular season with a 72-10 record, one of the best in NBA history, setting a new standard for dominance in the league. This team wasn't just about the talent of one player, it was about cohesion, strategy, and collective effort. Michael was undoubtedly the star, but the strength of the team came from their ability to work together. Scottie Pippen, Michael's longtime teammate, was instrumental in the team's success. The dynamic between Michael and Scottie had been the backbone of the Bulls during their earlier championships, and their chemistry was even stronger after Michael's return. Pippen was a versatile player, capable of scoring, rebounding, and defending, and his all-around skills were the perfect complement to Michael's scoring ability and leadership. The 1996 season was the first of 3 consecutive championships for the Bulls. The playoffs that year were a testament to their dominance, as they powered through the competition with an intensity that few teams could match. The team's defense was suffocating, and their offense flowed through Michael, who averaged over 30 points per game during the postseason. But despite his individual brilliance, it was the teamwork that set the Bulls apart from other teams. The finals that year saw the Bulls face the Seattle Supersonics, and although the Sonics had a solid team, the Bulls' dominance was clear from the start. Michael Jordan's performance in the finals was transcendent. He had come back with a purpose, and his focus was unshakable. With the series tied 2-2, the Bulls clinched the championship with 2 dominant victories, sealing Michael's 4th NBA title. But Michael didn't just focus on his scoring ability, he was a leader in every sense of the word. He demanded the best from his teammates, pushing them to exceed their limits. His fierce competitiveness and attention to detail rubbed off on the entire team. Michael was often seen challenging his teammates during practice, refusing to accept anything less than perfection. He would raise the bar for everyone around him, and in doing so, he raised the entire team's level of play. As the dynasty grew, so did Michael's reputation. By the time the Bulls won their 2nd consecutive title in 1997, Michael had become the undisputed greatest player in the NBA. The 1996 to 1997 season was another dominant run for the Bulls, who finished with the best record in the league. They faced off against the Utah Jazz in the finals, with Michael's ability to perform under pressure becoming the defining storyline of the series. In Game 5 of the finals, Michael famously played through a severe case of flu-like symptoms in what became known as the flu game. Despite being visibly weak and dehydrated, Michael played 44 minutes and scored 38 points, leading the Bulls to a crucial win on the road. This game, more than any other, encapsulated Michael's incredible mental and physical toughness. It wasn't just about the physical ability to score, it was about heart, determination, and the will to win no matter the circumstances. The Bulls went on to win the series, clinching their 5th NBA title. Michael's leadership and performance were beyond compare. The win solidified the Bulls' place as a dynasty, and Michael's legacy as the greatest player in the world seemed to be set in stone. But for Michael, the pursuit of greatness was never truly finished. Even with 5 championships, the hunger to prove himself, to win more titles, and to continue pushing the limits remained. In the 1997 to 1998 season, Michael Jordan and the Bulls embarked on what would be their final campaign together as a dynasty. The Last Dance, as it would later be known, was a season of reflection and, ultimately, closure. The team had been through so much, the highs of winning championships, the challenges of keeping their dynasty intact, and the pressure of being the best year after year. The 1997 to 1998 season was filled with uncertainty, with rumors swirling that this would be the last season for the Bulls' core group. Despite the drama surrounding the team, Michael was as focused as ever. He knew this would be the last opportunity for him and the Bulls to win another championship. The team had its share of ups and downs, with injuries and distractions threatening to derail their season. But Michael's leadership was the glue that held the team together. He had the ability to elevate his teammates and push them to exceed expectations. The 1998 finals saw the Bulls face the Utah Jazz once again. This time, however, the series was even more intense. The Jazz were hungry, with a roster featuring Karl Malone and John Stockton, and they pushed the Bulls to the limit. In Game 6 of the finals, with the Bulls up 3-2, Michael Jordan delivered one of the most iconic moments in NBA history. With just under 30 seconds left in the game, Michael made a steal on Jazz guard Karl Malone and then hit a jump shot over Brian Russell, giving the Bulls an 87-86 lead and effectively sealing the championship. The Bulls went on to win their 6th title, completing their second three-peat. As Michael Jordan stood on the court, holding his 6th championship trophy, it was clear that this was the culmination of his career with the Chicago Bulls. The team had gone through so much, and Michael had been at the center of it all. His leadership, his ability to perform under pressure, and his unwavering determination had defined not just the Bulls dynasty, but the entire NBA era of the 1990s. The Last Dance season marked the end of an era. Michael Jordan's dominance in the NBA had reached its peak, and he had solidified his place in history as one of the greatest to ever play the game. The Bulls dynasty was over, and Michael's time in Chicago had come to an end. But the impact of his career, of his time with the Bulls, would be felt for generations. The Chicago Bulls had gone from a team struggling to find their identity to a dynasty that defined an era of basketball. Michael Jordan had taken them there, and he had taken them to the top, not just through his talent, but through his leadership and his relentless pursuit of greatness. The legacy of the Bulls and Michael Jordan would live on as one of the most iconic stories in sports history. Michael Jordan's career had come full circle. After winning 6 NBA championships, cementing himself as the greatest player the game had ever seen, and building a legacy that would span generations, his journey was nearing its end. But this final chapter wasn't just about basketball. It was about a man who had transcended the sport, a man who had used the game as a platform to shape not only his own life but the lives of millions around the world. In the years following his second retirement from the NBA, Michael Jordan's impact on the world only grew. His name was synonymous with greatness, not just in basketball, but in business, philanthropy, and cultural influence. He had become an icon. His Air Jordan brand had revolutionized the sneaker industry, turning into a global phenomenon that influenced fashion, culture, and even how athletes approached branding. Michael had created something bigger than basketball. He had created a legacy that spanned beyond the hardwood. But beyond the trophies, the commercials, and the sponsorships, Michael Jordan's true legacy was in the lessons he imparted. His story wasn't just about winning games, it was about overcoming adversity, facing challenges head-on, and, perhaps most importantly, the unrelenting pursuit of excellence. Every obstacle he faced, every doubter who told him he couldn't make it, only fueled his determination to be the best. It wasn't just about personal glory, it was about the desire to prove that anything was possible with hard work, resilience, and an unwavering belief in oneself. As Michael reflected on his career, it was clear that the journey had been more than just about basketball. It had been about pushing limits, both on and off the court. His battles were never just with his opponents, they were with himself. Every time he faced a challenge, whether it was the physical toughness of the Detroit Pistons, the mental strain of dealing with the media, or the heartbreak of losing his father, Michael found ways to push through. He made the impossible seem attainable, and in doing so, he inspired countless others to chase their dreams, no matter the odds. As a businessman, Michael Jordan had redefined what it meant to be an athlete in the modern world. His partnership with Nike had created the Air Jordan brand, turning him into one of the highest-paid athletes of all time. But even more than the financial success, Michael's entrepreneurial ventures showed a different side of him, a side that was just as competitive off the court as it was on. Whether it was his ownership stake in the Charlotte Hornets or his involvement in various charitable endeavors, Michael had taken his platform and used it for more than just personal gain. He had taken the lessons of discipline, leadership, and excellence from the basketball court and applied them to every aspect of his life. Off the court, Michael's charitable work spoke volumes about his character. Through his Michael Jordan Foundation, he funded initiatives aimed at helping underprivileged youth, promoting education, and fighting for social justice. His donations to various causes, particularly in his hometown of Wilmington, were a reflection of his understanding that greatness wasn't just about what you achieved for yourself, it was about what you gave back to the world. As the years passed and Michael moved further from the game, the world continued to honor his legacy. The documentary The Last Dance became a cultural touchstone, revisiting the heights of the Bulls dynasty and showcasing Michael's leadership and drive. It reminded fans of what made him great, not just his scoring titles and championships, but his relentless work ethic, his mental toughness, and his ability to lead by example. The documentary also revealed a side of Michael that few had seen before, the vulnerability, the sacrifices, and the emotional toll that came with being the greatest. For all his success, Michael was still a man who struggled with loss, faced his own doubts, and pushed through the toughest moments of his life. But no matter how many years passed, the story of Michael Jordan's career was always going to be defined by his ability to perform when it mattered most. His iconic moments, whether it was the shot against Cleveland, the flu game in the 1997 finals, or his final game-winning shot in the 1998 finals, would forever be etched in the memories of basketball fans. These moments weren't just about a player scoring points, they were about a man stepping up when the world was watching, delivering when the stakes were the highest, and making the impossible seem effortless. As time went on, Michael's relationship with the game of basketball evolved. He had retired from playing, but he remained a vital part of the sport. As the owner of the Charlotte Hornets, he was still involved in the game, though in a different capacity. His influence was no longer just about being a player, it was about helping others find success, whether it was through his work with younger players, his ownership of the Hornets, or his involvement in the global growth of the NBA. Even as a retired player, Michael Jordan continued to shape the future of the game in ways that few could have anticipated. In the later years of his life, Michael Jordan's influence had stretched far beyond the basketball court. He had become a global ambassador for excellence, inspiring millions with his story of resilience, triumph, and the pursuit of greatness. His legacy was more than just a collection of accolades, it was about the indelible mark he left on the culture of sports and business, and how he inspired generations of athletes, entrepreneurs, and fans to chase their own dreams with the same relentless passion that defined his career. The final moments of Michael Jordan's career weren't defined by his last game or his final championship. They were defined by the impact he had on the world long after he stepped off the court. Michael's true legacy wasn't just in the titles he won, the records he broke, or the moments that made him a legend. His legacy was in the way he lived his life, a life defined by ambition, greatness, and a constant striving for more. As Michael looked back on his career, he knew that his journey wasn't just about basketball. It was about the people he had touched, the challenges he had overcome, and the lessons he had learned along the way. And in the end, that was the true measure of his greatness. It wasn't just about the trophies or the fame, it was about the difference he made in the world and the way he had inspired others to chase their own dreams. Michael Jordan's legacy would live on, not just in the record books, but in the hearts and minds of those who had watched him play, and in the lives of those who would never forget the lessons he taught. The story of Michael Jordan was never just about one man's rise to greatness, it was about the endless pursuit of excellence, the resilience to overcome adversity, and the belief that anything was possible with hard work, determination, and an unyielding commitment to your craft. And in that, Michael Jordan's legacy would live on forever.